match of this crazy house Saturday afternoon, evening, or maybe it's even Sunday where you are. I see here in the calendar it's the upcoming match between Bugzilla and zyxon is listed as being played on Sunday. But here in Sweden it's still Saturday for a couple of more minutes. Bugzilla of Australia and zyxon of Sweden are facing off in this match, and I expect a very tense match. It's hard to predict the outcome. zyxon is the slight Euro favorite, I think. If we take a look here at the overall standings, earlier this evening Katask beat Clearcast 10-0 in a fantastic match. The 10-0 result didn't quite reflect the way the games were being played, but Katask had all the margins on his side and did a clean sweep of Clearcast. So Katask is in the lead when you look at the winning percentage, 90%. He's won 2 matches, 10-0 and 1-9-1 versus Bugzilla, who we'll see tonight. He also beat Bugzilla's opponent zyxon 7-3. But zyxon was actually able to hurt Katask in that match. So let's see what happens tonight. I've seen that both players are online, ready to play, and we will follow my fellow countryman zyxon. zyxon starting off with e4 and Bugzilla choosing a modest but flexible setup. I know in Bughouse zyxon often does this bishop check here on b5, trading on d7, but here he chooses another setup. So when white castles, black pushes in the center, and sometimes black can, let's say, trade queens and beat white to the attack. Black simply gets there first if white is not careful here, and maybe this is already dangerous for white. You have the pawn here attacking g2, and a queen trade is about to happen. So welcome everybody. It seems like zyxon is having some problems here. He probably will have to close the d file. Maybe pawn d5, I'm not sure. But this is annoying, nevertheless. zyxon thinking a lot here. Is there even a defense for white? Yeah, pawn d5, that was what I suggested. Pawn d5, but then black will take on g2. And white cannot really take on c6 because of the queen trade. But pawn takes, and white will have to take on g2 with the king, I suppose. Yeah, here comes pawn d5. And his king side is permanently damaged. I have a 30-second delay because I don't want the players to see what I'm saying. So I hope I did the right thing with the delay. Both black bishops here pointing toward the king's side. I think the delay is 20 seconds. That's where I put it anyway. And actually, when you look back in the opening, at this point, I usually put my bishop on e2 just to avoid the e5 pawn push later on here. Makes it slightly less attractive. So the material is more or less equal, but the white king side is damaged. And zyxon is really low on time as well. So white picks up rook and probably will attack the knight that defends f3. Yeah, he wants... Obviously it's good with trades for black right now. Black would love to see a trade here on g4. But this looks dangerous. What if... Oh, if you take here, you have check here with the rook maybe. And then bishop check here, and you will pick up the queen with check. And now the rook is defending here, and the knight is defending h6, so there are no tricks. If black had taken on f2, there would have been some tricks with the knight at h6. But this is just over. A failure here in the opening for zyxon. Bugzilla tricked him. And let's see what opening Bugzilla chooses. So eventually he pushes the d pawn 2 steps forward. And now it looks more mainstream. This is a theoretical line where I think white should play bishop g5, yeah. I've seen zyxon playing this before as black, so he knows what to do. He had to look out for queen at e7 mate, and it's a threat again. And white needs to be careful, because let's say he didn't play bishop h5, instead he played knight g5, then black would have mated him in a couple of moves. Just knight e2 check, king here, and queen g1 followed by a smothered mate. So once again, black needs to be careful so he doesn't get mated on e7. So this knight protects e7. And now white has a knight, so white would really like to play knight g7 and pick up this. But he doesn't have the time now. Black is threatening knight h3, followed by queen g1. It's the smothered mate. The king will run and hide. So this is pointing here and also defending g7. So defensive move covering the dark squares here, but also pointing towards h2. And not sure what white should do here. He puts a pawn here in front of his king, cutting off the bishop. And if white somehow gets two knights, he would probably go bam bam or the other way around. So one has one knight. And he'll probably get another knight here. And then he can start thinking about a mating attack here with his knights. Yes. So this is a problem now for black. Knight here, knight here. I don't see good defense for black. I could even take on d6, clearing e7 for the queen. And Zyxon resigns. So 2-0 Bugzilla. And Zyxon plays something else. Maybe he just forgot his preparation in the first game. So this is probably the idea, to just pick up a free pawn. And we have mutual attacks here. And if black takes on g2, I think you take the rook in the corner rather than picking up the queen. And this looks dangerous for black. Let's say knight here, pawn here, pawn here. You probably want to place the knight on e5 rather than g5 because you want to keep this diagonal open. So this is a preparatory move. Preparing knight e5 check. And now knight g5 is an option as well. So both knight g5 and knight e5 is a threat. And the advantage with knight g5 is also that it hits h3. Another trick for white that someone pointed out in the chat is sometimes you can place a pawn on e6 and then knight g5. For instance, now maybe pawn e6, knight g5, king e8, take on e6. Once again, knight g5 is a threat. And this queen is doing an excellent job protecting the king. Bugzilla puts his rook to work. And this looks good, covering g5. But the white attack looks strong. Although white only has 2 knights now in hand. So this bishop is in an active spot, but also covering e6. White trying to get rid of some pressure here on the light squares. I wonder if white will play knight e3 maybe. Try to get rid of the bishop. So if black takes, white takes, and black surely cannot take on e6. A little in-between move, picking up the bishop here with a mating threat on f7. And this is looking good for white. Really good. So this move threatens f7 if you cannot take because of queen at f7. Also d7 is under attack. So what is the best way to proceed here for white? He picks up a pawn here, hitting the rook also. And if the rook takes, maybe pawn g7 or pawn d7. Yeah, thank you so much. Bugzilla is low on time and it's mate next move. Nice one by zyxon, who got an advantage there out of the opening, I think, when he remembered his preparation. So this is different from the first white Bugzilla game. Black has some problems finding squares for his pieces. I guess white could take on c6 and put a knight here. This is a maneuver you see often in this kind of position. You can go to h3 with the queen, and then all of a sudden, if black plays bishop g6, white can take on g6, forcing black to take back with the f pawn because the h pawn is pinned. But this move puts an end to the queen h3 idea, because it was hitting c2. But look at this knight. It has some problems retreating from b4. At the moment it's hitting c2, so white has to protect c2, but the knight is about to get trapped by a3. Although black will get a rook and a pawn for the two light pieces, and white is slightly weak here on the first rank. So maybe white just takes on g6. Oh, okay. Never mind. I was thinking take on g6 and then trap the knight. But what do I know? So the question is, can the queen become active here? So black has to look out for moves like knight takes f7 with a discovered threat on the queen. And maybe white could consider taking here and taking on c7, because b7 is really weak. You could put your pawn there in the next move. Yeah, and why not just take g6, take c7, prepare pawn at b7. I thought taking on c7 before was a bit more forcing, probably stronger. Although white seems to be in great shape here. Black hoping to create some tactical chances here, maybe knight here. Black is happy to give the queen for 2 pieces. Maybe I take that back, because now, wow, look at that c file. Well, the problem wasn't so much that Black gave his queen for 2 pieces. Maybe white let Black off the hook a bit easily there. I see no reason why white should let Black get away with the king there. Why didn't he just take on c7 instead? Okay, so there was bishop at a5. Oh well. A lot of problems here for Black. Look at the last rank. So white is probably hoping to take here with the queen. So is there a forced mate? Does it take on f8, or what's the idea here? Maybe bishop check on c4 just to cover the light squares in the defense. And this went wrong for white. Wow. Pawn here, knight here, looking super dangerous. And Black only needs one more pawn. So queen e2, a2 is a threat. And look at that. No piece to put between, except the knight. And once again the same problem. Black needs to put his rook here if he wants to interpose. So this will queen on h8. And Bugzilla finally finds a mate there. He was in bad shape there for a while, I think. Let's have a quick look. Zyxon, what did you miss here in the end? Somewhere around here. Yeah. Knight d2 check. King c2. Queen at b3. Queen takes b2. Okay. But this, white has other options as well. And rook at g7. Rook takes g7 was a nice find. Okay, let's follow zyxon again. So they are playing in another opening now. And white won a piece on e4 and black has some light square compensation. Well, I'm so curious, Yanis. I want to know right away what happened. So I'm sorry if some of you think it gets messy, but apparently Yanis likes to check it out as well. So obviously black has some compensation for the piece. White needs to be careful, especially this is a problem child, because if you put it here on e2, f3 is weak. So you better keep it at home, I think, for the time being. Black got a second pawn for his piece. And maybe something like take here and knight d5. Doesn't that look good for black? Say bishop takes, queen takes, knight d5, bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, and bishop d7, and a lot of threats there for black. And I was about to say, I don't like pawn at a3. I think it's just too slow. This allows the white knight to get out of prison. And white can castle maybe. Play knight g3. This looks too slow and too materialistic. Oh, maybe white will regret the knight at b7, because after takes and queen takes, black has knight e2 check. So white trades queens here on d8. Maybe something like bishop here or bishop here, yeah, just to threaten queen at e7. And now what? Do you go rook e7 or something? I'm not sure. I would like to nail this guy in the center. Now you have knight here. This is almost mate. Takes an f1, diag here, bringing the king out on the board. Although this bishop covers h4. So maybe this is not as dangerous as it looks. Because if white gets the chance now, he will play pawn at d7 and it's all over. So that is why black decides to block the d7 square. White simply retreats and white looks safe. Rook at c8 is a threat. Black having nothing else to put in between than his queen. And white is threatening to pick up the rook in the corner. He might as well just take the queen. Trying to open up the g7 square. Heja Mårten. So this pins the rook. Once again, knight g7, taking on f5, stripping the black king of the defenders is a threat. So maybe something like, I don't know, pawn h6, try to block the h file. A lot of moves here for white. And that was tricky because after rook takes you have queen at c8 and now f6 is under attack. You could probably just take f6, put the pawn on the g5, and white is really happy about his position here. So now it's just over. This lures the rook away and queen c8 and mate here on h7. Nice game by zyxon. And we see the same line repeated as before. Black tried knight c6 here. And maybe the idea is queen h3, bishop g6, knight takes. As a matter of fact, what does black do after knight queen to h3? I'm not sure. So this is a problem for black. White can just take on b7. Queen takes, rook b8, and you can take the rook on b8 and place the rook on c8. Also you could trade on d7. But I would be really curious about what happens if you take with the queen on b7. if you trade everything here on d7, I don't think the queen is in much danger here on d7, or is it? Can you play knight here? Is it really dangerous? Knight e5, take, because white needs to look out, because black has bishop here and king takes and knight here, and it's almost mate. Maybe white has overestimated. Yeah, but I was thinking knight here, taking here, and maybe bishop d2. That looks dangerous for white. Oh, these bishops are beautiful. Also covering d6. d6 and c7, I should say. And you can't take on b5 because of pawn at c6. I was thinking maybe you should take on d5 before you check here, because after this check then you would have had queen at e6 check, trading queens. I'm a bit worried about the piece that white got for free there. So just throw your pieces at the opponent. Bishop b4, maybe. I was thinking bishop b4 so you could take on c3 after bishop e1, but white, black has been bleeding material here for a while. So he's down a queen, which means white is up 2 queens. White only needs to be a little careful here. Just defend for a couple of moves. Trade some pieces, create an opening, and then the extra material will tell. A nice little defender there on e2. And I expect maybe knight c5 just to get a pawn closer to the enemy king. Why not simply knight c5? This queen stripped the black king of one dark square defender. And now knight at c5 is definitely interesting. Look out for knight h4. Can black do something with those knights if he takes? So the knight, the rook in the corner, cutting off the king. And now maybe just give the queen for the rook here and put the rook on e8. You have knight c5 here. Just keep pounding him on the black squares here, and it will be over. And the king dies. Bugzilla 4-2 versus Zyxon. So Bugzilla pulling out another rabbit out of the hat. Taking on d5 with a queen is a bit unusual, because the queen will get attacked early in the game, allowing white to gain the initiative here in the opening. So white has some nice development here with his queen and his light pieces. And the rook is on a semi-open open file. One idea for white here would be to simply play rook g4, and then if black plays, let's say, pawn g4, then maybe just take on e6. But what is black supposed to do here? Because white could just play maybe knight g5, attacking h3 and e6. Not so easy to find a good move for black. Taking advantage of the pin here on the e file, and white just doesn't care about c2. He wants the black king. Taking here, king moves, and you don't have the time to pick up the rook because of pawn takes f7. This is looking very good for white. So maybe just take on f7 and then play d4 and protecting c2. After d4, it's possible to play bishop g5 later. So white prefers to protect the c2 pawn in another way. Many ideas here for white. One was maybe to take on g7 with a rook. Bishop takes and pawn e7. And these two fellows here on the king side, they don't scare white. They're just standing there. The white pieces are active. So black is hoping to take on h2 and maybe take on g1, but it takes so long time. White might even consider just taking and grabbing g7 and put a pawn on e7. Oh, he put a pawn on h6 instead. Okay, so he's threatening to take on g7. And Bugzilla just got tired of the position. He didn't want to see it anymore. He resigned. And it was indeed hopeless. But Bugzilla is still in the lead 4-3 with 3 games to go. So no queen d3 maneuver in this game. White provoking some dark square weaknesses. It's not clear though if white can make any use of this square, because this bishop is a far away from the c7 square and white doesn't even have a knight in hand anyway, so black is inviting take and bishop here, which would be a repetition. And if white wants to avoid this, maybe he can take on f6 and play knight e5. Oh, that was courageous. Because g5 creates some holes here for pawns. Maybe black will simply put his bishop on g7, yeah, protecting those dark squares on the king side. So this bishop cuts off the black king. Oh, I'm sure he would be satisfied with the draw there. Hoping to win as white. The white advantage in Crazy House is much larger than it is in chess. How do you get the black king to safety? So black was threatening g2. Maybe the knight can go back. Although white is threatening taking on c7 and placing the knight on d6, disrupting the black king. So with the knight on f5, white is covering d6. So white is placing his pieces with tempo now. And knight at c7 might be a problem here for black. With this move he intends to meet knight c7 with king d7. And if white takes, you can take back with the rook. So if black takes here, bishop takes, king takes, you have knight b5 check because the c pawn is being pinned by the white rook. So I don't think black will be taking on c7. It's way too dangerous. Instead he threatens the white queen. How bad is this anyway? Take here, knight b5, king d8. Is it mate? Because the knight is covering e7. Well, zyxon was scared anyway. And when the bishop retreats, the queen can go to c5 the next move. Or queen b7, forking the rook and the king. That's why black places his rook on b7. But this is looking tough. Tough for black. And white threatening knight at c7. Simply too many threats here. White got a pawn for b7, and after pawn b7 he can play rook to a8. White is just super safe here. Not possible for black to create any threats. And white is also threatening to pick up the b6 pawn. Oh, he just resigns. White could have taken on g7 maybe. So, Bugzilla in the lead, 5-3. And it's that first game that truly hurts zyxon. He lost quickly as white. After that, the players have been keeping their serve, like in tennis. And this check is a bit annoying because you don't want to waste a pawn here, and this weakens the dark squares way too much. My favorite tennis player. Well, there are three players that are much better than any other player in history, and that's Federer and Nadal and Djokovic. I would say that the player that has the highest level of tennis is Djokovic. He's more of an all-around player. He's the only guy that could truly threaten Nadal on clay. So I would go for Djokovic. But Stefan Edberg, oh my, what a player. And it's kind of sad that you don't see any serve and volley players anymore on the tennis tour. So this queen in the corner, the baby in the corner, is actually a strong piece, covering a lot of important squares here and also threatening c6. This looks strong. Black could probably just take on d4 or something. And queen takes e4. Is it too risky? The problem is that if white takes here and the bishop takes, black is threatening to take on c3 and place the knight on f3. So does the real Roger Federer play in chess.com? That would be nice. So he does go for the queen sack, but what about bishop takes c3 here? Isn't it just over? Because you're threatening knight here and queen e1. Obviously, zyxon must have anticipated bishop takes c3. But what can he do here? Knight here, and it's mate. Pretty soon, I think. Yep. So, Bugzilla will win this match. And let's see how big the winning margin will be. And zyxon copying the Bugzilla opening of the first few games. And if we're speaking surface and you're thinking clay, I would pick Nadal, obviously. He is virtually unbeatable on clay when he isn't injured. Swedish player Robin Söderling actually beat Nadal in Paris which was quite a shock. But I think Nadal was not at his best. Then he was a bit injured or something. And tragically, Robin Söderling got sick. I don't know what the disease is called in English, but he got sick and he never came back. So this is a standard trick, picking up 2 pawns here for a piece. But this is also a standard trick, hitting g7, and if rook g8, the h7 pawn is hanging. So putting pressure here on the defender here on f6. This queen is dangerous for black. What do you do here? Do you check on f5 or what do you do? Yeah. Maybe bishop h6. So bishop h6, king g8, and then take the knight perhaps. So this nets a pawn for g7. And if the queen takes here, you have rook e7. And this is looking just hopeless. You have bishop h6 and it's over. So, impressive win there by Bugzilla. Winning 7-3 against zyxon. I hope you all enjoyed. And I will see you around. Bye bye.